What is three-stage discounted cash flow valuation? Well, in order to define three-stage discounted cash flow valuation, we must first define enterprise value and weighted average cost of capital. Enterprise value, often abbreviated as EV, denotes the difference between the sum of a company's common shares, preferred shares, market value of debt and minority interest, and its cash and cash equivalents. This is simply presented as the sum of the market value of its net debt and equity when deducing the weighted average cost of capital. The succeeding diagram depicts how the market value of net debt and equity constitute enterprise value. The weighted average cost of capital, or WACC, is an average of the cost of the market value of net equity and net debt according to their proportionality. The calculation of the WACC is an arduous process that requires extensive practice and education. Finbox.io is a reliable online analytical reference that lists the weighted average cost of capital of most publicly traded companies and corresponding diagram of how the calculations were performed. For example, the weighted average cost of capital of Tesla can be found by searching Tesla at finbox.io and referring to the capital asset pricing model for working at the weighted average cost of capital under financial model templates. This is a snapshot or a screenshot of a cropped and edited modified screenshot of Finbox.io's calculation of Tesla's weighted average cost of capital. Essentially, you can input the ticker of any publicly traded company, any stock or share of a company, and it will present you with the company's weighted average cost of capital when you simply refer to the following section under financial model templates. Three-stage discounted cash flow valuation can be defined by the following process. We must first ascertain the weighted average cost of capital. Secondly, calculate the sum of the quotients of the average annual cash flow and 1 plus the weighted average cost of capital to the power of the period number or year in consecutive order for the preceding 5 or 10 years, depending on the length required of projection by discounting future cash flows. And finally, find the quotient of this number and the number of shares outstanding. If projecting for 10 years cash flow, then use the average of 10 years. If for 5 years, ad infinitum, etc. ad infinitum, the average of 5 years cash flow. So essentially, you're just taking the average for the given period or duration, usually 5 to 10 years, it depends. And you're taking that cash flow and you're dividing it by 1 plus the weighted average cost of capital to the power of that period number. So you'd start off with to the first power, and then simply to the second power, to the third, to the fourth, and then to the fifth if you're doing 5 years, and this is the average cash flow 5 years. If 10 years, the CF represents the average cash flow of 10 years, and this would persist until it's the cash flow, the quotient of the cash flow and 1 plus, or the sum of 1, the weighted average cost of capital to the 10th power. And then the total, the final sum is then divided by the number of shares outstanding. So essentially, it's the cash flows of 10 years, the sum of the cash flows of 10 years, all discounted over time according to the weighted average cost of capital, and the period number or the year of that cash flow or of the cash flows in question, divided by the number of shares outstanding. So you're really just assuming that the fair value of the company is the sum of its future cash flows for either 5 or 10 years, and then you're assuming the cash flow is the average of the preferred or required duration or period